Hello, everyone. I am Mavis Dawson, and I am coming to you live from the Hive here at my school. And I will be presenting here, completing my project. Um, First and foremost, I just want to say that all students are general education students, and there really is no such thing as special education, in my opinion, because I know that all kids are capable of learning at their own pace, and we should not label them. But the title of my presentation is Understanding the Least Restrictive Environment, also known as LRE, and an Emotional Disturbance Ruling in Classrooms. And emotional disturbance is abbreviated as ED, as you see in my title. These are two topics that are near and dear to my heart because I work with both calibers of students each and every day. So I know what a child with an emotional disturbance ruling can do to a classroom. But before I get started, I want to read these two very important quotes that I absolutely adore. And the first one says, "For these kids, all are our children. We will profit by or pay for whatever they become." And that is so true, and which is another reason why we need to stop, or we should not label children and just work with them at their own pace, because they're all capable of learning. We just need to tap into that light bulb that goes off into their heads at different times and meet them where they are and bring them where they need to be. The second quote that I absolutely love is, "Every student can learn, just not all the same day, the same way." Now that sums it up in a nutshell for me, and that's by George Evans, and I just thought I would share that with you today. So moving forward, in our agenda, we will be discussing. I'll have my introduction. Um, then we'll do quick facts about the ED ruling and LRE, the good and bad of the LRE. Hang in there. Don't give up on Bobby. A summary and references. And let me just go back. Oh, okay, I can't go back. But at any rate, introduction of the least restrictive environment. Um, I want to say the mandatory inclusion is the mother of the least restrictive environment, because without it, there would be no need for mandatory inclusion. But one of the things that we need to understand about it is that it's the most vital part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Which is also known as IDEA, and there are a ton of acronyms in special education. So forgive me if you see a lot of them in parentheses. And of course, the IDEA is defined as a special education law that mandates regulation for students with disabilities to protect their rights as well as the rights of their parents. This act requires that all students receive a free and appropriate public education, also known as FAPE, and that these students should be educated in their least restricted environments. Okay, question. Did you know that the least restrictive environment is not defined in the statutes? So really, there is no clear definition of what least restrictive environment is, because it's not defined in the statutes. However, it is regulated by policies and procedures that have been set forth by different organizations. And really, all of them agree on one thing, and that is that a child should be educated in his or her most least restricted environment. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. The timeline I thought was important in terms of explaining this law, least restrictive environment. And I first wanted to look at special education as a whole. Education in general really started in the later 1900s. However, um, by around the 1850s and 1950s, this is where the teachers started noticing the differences, I guess, in children and how they learn, and the ones who needed special education assistance. So at that time, classes had begun to form on special education for special education students, or students who need that extra help. I hate labeling them. And then we had Brown versus the Board of Education in 1954, of which mandated that no schools or students can separate children based on race. Now, that was all wonderful. However, it didn't do a lot for the special education students, or students who needed the special education resources. And then we had the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which basically, again, ruled that there would be no discrimination based on any of the genders or things of that nature. And neither did it do a lot for special children with special needs. So we had these laws in place, but they really weren't addressing the needs of special education students. So then came the Timothy versus the district, or the Rochester Board of Education in 1987. And that was really like the first time that there was a law that was made point on and head on for children who needed special education services, because this law ruled that the school districts were responsible for educating all of the students in that district, and that included and embraced the full embodiment of children who needed special education services. So IDEA came along and enhanced what Timothy versus Rochester Board of Education law did. And when IDEA was born, it specified, it came with all of the bells and whistles of meeting the needs of those students. By the late 1990s, early 2001, mandatory inclusion came on the scene, and so did the 14 rulings of special education, or children with disabilities, or children who need special education services, and along with the least restrictive environment. All of those came to be about at the end of the 1990s and early 2001. So the timeline was really a great one to look at. And I'm going to show you right here what the 14 rulings are of special education. And you see autism, deafblindness, deafness, developmental delays, being emotional disturbed. That is a ruling that we see a lot in inner city schools. Emotionally disturbed students who are, and I'm going to define it in a minute, but those are the other ones, the hearing impairment students, intellectual disabilities, of which kind of coincides with emotionally disturbed by definition. Multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairments, other health impairments, and you see the rest of them. So those are the 14 categories of students with disabilities that are covered under LRE and the other components of IDEA. This pie chart, I love visuals. This is great because one of the things it shows you is a percentage of breakdowns, statistically, as to how many kids, and it was are affected, or in this category, falls within these categories under the special education rulings. And if you look right here, emotional disturbance, 6.2%, although it is the smallest, well, it's not the smallest, because speech and language, actually, yeah, other health impairments is, but it is a small percentage. However, an emotionally disturbed child in a regular classroom setting can be as large as specific learning disability category. So it's small in terms of how it appears on this chart, but the magnitude and the volume of disturbances that can happen as a result of this caliber of student can change the entire scope and culture of teaching and learning in regular classroom settings. Here Some quick facts about the emotional disturbance rulings in LRE. The first one is the characteristics. If you notice here, they are very hyperactive, and you'll see a lot of fighting, a lot of arguments, a lot of frustrations right here. And emotional the emotional ruling defined is defined as someone who has a condition that exhibits four of these characteristics. And I don't want to read them head on, but they mainly have the inability to learn and can't be explained by intellectual, sensory, or health factors. And a lot of inner city or black children have been given this ruling in schools. The least restrictive environment is right here, which is to determine what an appropriate setting is for a student with an individualized education plan. This is how they determine it. The team will review the student's strengths, weaknesses, and needs, and then consider their educational benefits from placement. And that's how it's decided where they will get their education from. Here is the hierarchy of the LRE, and notice how the goal is to get to general education. However, residential facilities, that's like the most restricted environment. And then you have homeschool, then you have non-public schools, and it goes all the way down to the general education classroom, which is where they want everyone to be. And I thought this was a cute comic strip right here where the mother says, I am homeschooling you. That doesn't mean you can't misbehave in class. If you keep calling out, I will have to call your mother and report my concerns to myself. So it can make you a little off if working in that area with those kids. So the good, the bad, and the indifference of the LRE. The advantages are the interactions that they get to associate with their peers and hang out with their peers and learn with their peers, and that is a wonderful thing. As far as achievements, they get to set goals and reach those goals, whatever they may be. Attitudes are formed. They help them to develop positive attitudes and achieve the goals that they want to achieve about themselves. The bad would be the challenges of LRE is the balance, how to balance those things out. And yes, I'm back. I just wanted to expand upon the cons of the least restrictive environment. A lot of times, people have said that, the child suffers as well if he or she is not in their um, best environment to thrive. So one thing about least restrictive environment is that we need to make sure that and be careful that we are placing a child in an environment where he or she can thrive and be the most successful. Um, there's also the issue of dumbing down or lowering the standards for regular education students because they're not able to receive the learning or the teaching and learning experiences they deserve, because too often emotional disturbances in the class will stop or prohibit teaching and learning on behalf of the teachers and the students. So excuse me, being careful to make sure that we place our students in the best environment so that they can thrive educationally, academically, and socially is to everybody's best interest. In this slide, hang in there. This is just a video that I thought would be very interesting so that you can see what it looks like to have an emotionally disturbed child in a classroom. And of course, I'm at the elementary education level. This child is a little older. He is older. He's like more like middle school or high school. But her strategy and her tactics used to help him overcome his ruling is really is to be commended and admired. She does a great job. She has a really good strategy for trying to help kids with this ruling. So hold on, and I'm going to show it to you now. Well, that is a great excerpt of having emotionally disturbed children in your classroom. That is what you would deal with on a daily basis. But she has a strategy, and it's real simple, just not giving up. And her work should be commended, and I'm sure eventually she will reach Bobby, and he'll come on and join the classroom. So, summary of what we talked about. An idea can be complicated, and the rules for inclusion are no exception. This advisory only discusses the general rules, but if you want an easy way to ensure compliance without having to learn all of the ins and outs of the inclusion mandate in federal law, simply do the following. Number one, think of children with disabilities as children first and foremost, wanting and needing all the same developmental and educational opportunities as children who are developing typically. And finally, do whatever you can. Provide any aids and services to prevent separating children with disabilities from their peers in placement in what they are taught or in any other activities. And that is from Matthew Stowe, J.D. Beach Center on Disability. And that is a summary of what special education, meeting their needs, the least restricted environment, and emotional disturbance rulings. I want to thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak with you guys. Another quote that I love is, regardless of their level of skill or whether they possess a disability, people cannot be productive if they are unable to function in the society and the workforce. So this concludes my presentation. I hope you enjoyed the stats or any information that I provided for you. And that is pretty much it. So thank you guys very much.